morning, everyone. Thank you so much for making your way over on a rainy day. I think we've already heard some amazing content from UNHCR, but we wanted to keep the discussion going and show you a bit more about the world of aid, because it's not one agency alone that can accomplish everything. It takes a number of different people and perspectives and approaches to make an impact at the scale that we need to solve for. So my name is Tori Samples. I am a senior product manager at SDF, and I am joined today by some incredibly talented people. We have Emily Barnes, who was just referenced in David's video, Senior Technical Advisor of Cash and Emergencies at the International Rescue Committee. We have Shashank Rai, who is the CTO of UNICC, which, as someone who's been working in this space for a while, I did not know what the UNICC was, but it's the United Nations International Computing Center.
Yes.
And we'll hear more about that in a bit. And then we have Jorge Fernandez, who is a strategic advisor for the Innovation Accelerator at the World Food Program. So I'd love for you all just to take a second and introduce what you do. We just used a lot of words in that very short introduction, and I'm guessing that most of us don't actually know what that means day to day. So if you could just share a bit about who you are, we'll jump into questions after that.
Sorry,
maybe we'll start with George.
Is it on? Is my on? Okay, then we reverse rows. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jorge Fernandez, and I lead the Innovative Finance and Frontier Innovations team at WFP Innovation Accelerator. So we basically try to connect and build solutions that assist our work at the World Food Program, leveraging technologies like AI, blockchain, digital payments, but also more traditional frugal innovations in the context of nutrition and what we do in the context of supporting smallholder farmers or some of the same displaced populations that Carmen was talking about. I can go into it a little bit later more. Thank you, Tori.
Right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shashank Rai. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for this entity called United Nations International Computing Center. For the past 52 years, ICC has really been a cooperative which provides IT and digital solutions to the UN family. So the organization plays two roles, and obviously one is to provide substantive IT to the UN organizations, but then also work in innovative technology fields such as blockchain, AI, etc. In fact, for last couple of years, we have been running a UN-wide blockchain, not Stellar, but a more permission internal blockchain, sort of trying to understand how this technology can benefit the ecosystem. And yes, I think more from the frontline injuries of running such complex solutions, then our role is to really guide and advise the UN agencies how these can be really used effectively. Because as you heard Carmen earlier, there's a degree of responsibility that comes, especially when you're looking at publicly funded organizations such as ourselves to deliver solutions. So, and I think a third role, which I think we'll talk about as well a bit later on, is actually trying to advise the non-technical people on differences of, especially with blockchain. I think there's a whole degree of perception, and with crypto and Bitcoin and whatnot. And it's a bit of a journey within the UN ecosystem to try and inform people that there is blockchain and there is blockchain, and there is good and bad as always. And I think that's one of the other roles we play. And that's not a fun role, I can tell you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Barnes. I'm with the International Rescue Committee. My role is not technically focused, so I am here to speak for the people who don't know what these technologies really are from, other than their usage in the field. So what I do is help the IRC globally implement quality cash programming in emergencies and outside emergencies. So I have experience doing this, but not experience in building blockchains, which is why they are here.
Thank you all. And I want us to recognize that we have three very different perspectives up here. So we have an innovator, a technologist, and an operator. But I think that we have a shared passion and a common goal to use technology to serve people with dignity, no matter who they are, where they are, or what has happened to them in life thus far. So from your unique perspectives, I just want to start broad. How is the need for aid and assistance changing, or how has it changed over time in your experience?
Well, from our perspective, the reality is that unfortunately we're living the worst food crisis since World War II. There are currently, 1 in 10 people don't have enough food to eat, even though we kind of waste 1/3 of the global food production on a yearly basis. On top of that, we have 345 million people that are acute food insecure. So they can lead to all kinds of health issues as well, 50 million of which are actually knocking on the door of starvation. So this is really a huge crisis. And for all the resources that UN has been able to mobilize thanks to our generous donors, it's just not enough. So we have a tremendous funding gap, and we're trying to see how can we attract different pools of capital, particularly engaging with the private sector, mobilizing also these technologies to be even more efficient at delivering that, be it food, but also increasingly cash assistance. So at the World Food Programme, we've been doing cash assistance for 15, 20 years. Yeah, we let's say, distributed 2.3 billion last year. And we had been trying to see how can we save every cent that it goes even to one more person or one more meal. And we've been looking at innovation across this space for many ways, be it from the Share the Meal app, which is our digital donations fundraising app, was named App of the Year, both by Apple and Google last year. And it's been great at tapping with individuals that want to give as little as 80 cents to feed a child for a day. Or, we're now exploring also blockchain in the context of this distribution just to be far more efficient and effective. And I can talk more about our building blocks project in a second, but it's just a way to see how can we actually increase organizational effectiveness, but especially provide choice, provide flexibility, provide dignity to the people that we serve that are amongst the most vulnerable in the world, unfortunately.
Go ahead, Emily, please.
I think one of the biggest issues we're facing now is these complex, protracted crises that actually have multiple different levels of need. So there's not only people who are food secure, there's people who actually face gender-based violence alongside being food secure and have displaced from conflict. So we're seeing these mixed needs, and we need mixed ways of addressing those needs while also being cost-effective. And often you get to be cost-effective through economies of scale. So if you have to reach different needs in different ways, cash can do that. But there's also many different ways of delivering cash, and we have to choose ones that are what our clients want and need and understand, as well as cost-effective and can be done at scale. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge.
So I think there are two dimensions in my view on this. So one obviously is the changing dimension of how assistance has been delivered. So we've all heard, cash is coming in first, cash-based assistance is taking place. And then from an underlying structure of cash itself, that is changing. And there are two challenges thus the organizations are broadly facing, any humanitarian aid delivery organization. So first, they're trying to adapt to cash delivery. And then obviously that cash delivery is no longer, and there are examples of UN organizations where people had bags full of money handcuffed to their wrists, and they went on planes and they delivered money, and that worked for a while. Thankfully, nobody's wrists were severed off. But as technology is bringing new ways in which we look at cash, there's a degree of that catch-up that needs to also happen, and really, so both layers moving quite rapidly. But I think the beauty of all of this is, or the most promising part of all of this is that, likes with WFP, likes with UNHCR, there are organizations which are now open to looking at these new tech and open to sort of understanding how they can really help them being effective in the field, and to Emily's point, really get the most bang for the buck, as they say.
I think it's worth pointing out that cash is not new in the humanitarian space. We, sometimes not being in that world, we might think of giving away blankets or bags of rice, but the space has actually been quite innovative for a while and has been doing this, I think it was referenced 15, 20 years at least between your different organizations. But I love that point, Shashank, about the nature of cash changing so that we can become more effective and efficient in the space. This was not on the script, but because you all mentioned efficiency, I do want to bring it up because I hear this a lot. I think it's one of the primary concerns for anyone working in the space, that dollars are handled well. You heard that from Carmen earlier. And I just want to know, like, what's it like working under that type of pressure, that constraint? Because it is different than the private sector and you know, even government in some ways.
You want to start?
I can start for sure. So ISC is a large organization and is one of the biggest NGOs out there, but we're very small compared to the UN agencies. And so what larger NGOs are able to do is invest in innovations such as the Airbell Lab that David was explaining, such as your guys' roles, and that's very important. But we still have to be very lean, and I think that's very challenging. We need to be able to operate at scale, at cost-effective efficiencies, but also innovate at the same time, which means we start very small and we test things. Is it still working? And then we see if we can actually scale it up at cost. But it's very challenging to push things through when we have other bottom line needs that we need to make, especially in emergencies, which is where I focus. When we need to address an emergency, we don't have much time to think about what new technology can we innovate here. What can we roll out that's different as been done before? We do the thing that we know works best because we don't have time to question or really dally. So I think that is one challenge, is innovating alongside being really lean, having the ability to resource that both with funds and resources. I mean, I am not a technical person. We need people in ISC who can speak this language, and so we have to fund them. And donors and our clients expect us to reach as many people as possible. So weighing these innovations with being cost-efficient and making sure that we're reaching all the clients we can with the money we have is the challenge.
So efficiencies, and Emily, to your point, while the UN might look like, you know, a big powerhouse, I've been with the ecosystem for 6 years now, and coming in from the private sector, it is quite surprising and challenging that those funds are not there for us to, you know, also try different things. So it's really a lot of juggling that has to be done. Obviously, when either institutional or retail donors are making donations, they're expecting that directly to be effective in the field, rather than somebody playing, you know, with the tech toys. You know, as my team likes to tell me, we are just boys with toys. You know, blockchain, AI, whatnot. So that balance and that challenge is for the UN ecosystem as well. And I think that is where this whole equation with the private sector and the private-public partnership plays a very important role, because like we are looking at the Stellar Foundation and what it is doing, it's really bringing in that efficiencies that new technology can bring in. And then if I can sort of speak for ICC, we are saying, okay, how we work together and really then make it at scale and for the UN ecosystem or the international humanitarian aid system. So that's where that efficiency of the tool itself and efficiency of how we work together to build those tools are coming in.
Unfortunately, we have a tremendous funding gap to do the missions that we all want to do. Just give you a sense, we have plans for this year that would amount to 24.5 billion, and we are year to date something like 9.5 billion in our budget. That means that in the field, people have to make choices about who they help and how they help. So every cent gained that we can extract out of the process, it's basically translated into assistance to the field. And that can be, you know, the difference for some people that are being rationed, being in their food or cash assistance otherwise. So it's very important that we continue to invest in projects like, for example, building blocks, which is our largest use case on blockchain, where we are able to serve already, you know, what started with 100 people in a pilot in Pakistan 5-7 years ago, it's now serving more than 1 million people on a monthly basis, right? We have transferred more than 400 million to date through that, and, you know, be it to Syrian refugees in Jordan or Rohingya in Bangladesh, and now being deployed also in the context of Ukraine. And the good thing is that we could reduce bank transfer fees by 98%. And those 98% of savings are then translated into more cash assistance to the people, and that is just augmenting our ability to support them. And this is just one of those examples that we see if we continue to invest in innovation. And luckily, we were able at Innovation Accelerator WFP to attract interest from potential donors and partners that fund us specifically to invest in innovation, because they see the return will be later on, and therefore they are motivated, like us, to make sure that we continue to innovate and bring technologies that can help us do our services better to the people we want to serve. So luckily, we are in that position.
And I'm glad you brought it up because I didn't want to ask the leading question, but I'm sure it's on everyone's minds as we talk about efficiency and fees, that blockchain obviously can be of huge help in that space. So I want to ask the question, and this doesn't have to be for everyone, but now that we have more than 5 years of data, let's say, to see what blockchain does well and what it doesn't, because it definitely doesn't solve the world's problems, what is the space or the value add that you see for blockchain right now?
Well, in our case, has been particularly to optimize all the communication and all the transfers towards initially what we call closed-loop systems, because they were in a kind of a refugee camps where retailers were also associated, so it was very easy to reconcile data. And actually, it was primarily about an information flow, and then we would actually settle the accounts directly at the end. But what we see the potential is in terms of bringing a lot of flexibility to the people themselves, where they can have them direct payments that then they can either cash out, and the importance of off-ramps is absolutely paramount. And we're trying to do that more in open systems where we don't have retailers, but we need our partners to make sure that there are different options either for payments or for cashing out into local fiat currencies, because it's still very much a cash-driven economy in many places of the world, particularly where we are. But we see the potential. What we need to be mindful as well is also the risks, because the readiness in many contexts is not there, particularly in the type of places where we operate. And that's what we're trying to be very thorough in working with our partners in identifying, mapping, and mitigating. That's why our approach is very, focused and iterative in the sense of start small, learn and scale fast. And that's what we did with building blocks, and that's what we did with other technologies as well. So we're very much looking forward to continuing this journey and looking at also other use cases beyond cash assistance. We're looking at microinsurances, we're looking at supply chain use cases, because the same benefits can be there in other cases as well, but these are still early days.
So in terms of blockchain, particularly as a technology, and again, obviously, as I said, there's a whole journey about trying to educate people within the ecosystem about blockchain and blockchain. The back-end efficiencies, the back office efficiencies, I think are fairly clear. The speed of transfer, the efficiency of transfer, you touched upon the cost of transfer. That I think is pretty much very clear. That is something I do believe various UN agencies over the course of time will very quickly adopt. And then when we talk about blockchain and basically the retail part of it, where you're not talking about the aid delivery to the people who need it, I think that is a quite untested area. So we are all, dipping our toes into it, trying to figure out how can we deliver it, And we've spoken at length in this conference about digital and financial inclusiveness. And I think that technically, at least the way I see, is still a puzzle and a challenge to be solved. So when we are looking at people who may not have smartphones, where they will have no connectivity, how do you take this technology and the fruits of this technology right to the edge? And I think that last mile is the big challenge. I think the back office side of it, it's a slam dunk case.
You want to answer?
I was just going to also note that interoperability and the ability to deduplicate our aid is really critical, and the blockchain can definitely help with that. So this is when I want to make sure that I'm not reaching the same client as WFP or UNHCR. We can use back-end systems that are based on blockchain to do so, and that's very helpful. But what do our clients know of that? Nothing, right? They don't see that level of work that goes behind the scenes.
We'll come back to that in just a moment. But Shashank, I want to build on some aspects that you mentioned. So we'll go deep on blockchain for a second, and then we'll come out of it. You and I have talked about blockchain being an umbrella term at this point, having a lot of different meanings, but at its core, there's a decentralized ledger. I mean, it has to be. So in a context like yours, you're providing technology services for different UN agencies, and you have your toys. Where is the decentralization actually happening?
So I can talk about the use case we have been running for the last couple of years. If I can mention the technology, we're using Hyperledger Indy for decentralized IDs. And the idea is to build what we call a UN digital ID. So essentially a digital identity for the UN staff. And that's, again, an experimentation, quite crucial, because It will demonstrate within the ecosystem that how this DIDs and verifiable credentials, etc., work. And then hopefully, with the comfort the system develops internally, they can go out and use it in different other contexts. So when we talk about decentralization over here, I can't say it's off the record, but one of my favorite jokes of UN is that we are united in name only. So it's a big ecosystem, multiple agencies, and within each agencies, multiple facets to those agencies. So the decentralization internally there is to have these multiple UN agencies be able to communicate across each other. So really using that Indie Aries platform as a data exchange platform. Like just yesterday, Cristiano, who's from UNHCR, we were chatting, he said, when I moved from WFP, so he was working WFP here in Rome, to UNHCR, it took another 15 days for all the paperwork to be finished. And those are the efficiencies we are bringing, and the decentralization bit is then multiple UN agencies participating in a chain and using that as the data exchange platform. Now, when we talk about the context of financial aid delivery, and this is where, quite transparently in UN, a lot of discussion is taking place around governance of these technologies. Obviously, you have public chain and then public permissionless and public permission and whatnot, you all have it. And that is where a lot of discussion is taking place, which is how is this decentralization if I have to just go and sign up a legal contract with one organization? What is that element of decentralization that's coming in? Is it a decentralization that we look internally to some extent as a UN chain? And that, I think, will take a bit of time to settle down. And really, and honestly, as a techie, knowing all of this, for example, my team been running all this chain for last couple of years and all, it's an important question. Like if you have to answer this for the ecosystem, we don't really have clear answers to give and tell them, as technologists, this is how we see it.
And we're often behind the scenes. I mean, all of us, we're working on these projects day in and day out to make an impact, but it's an impact for real people in a real place. So to reference your point earlier, do people need to know how assistance is delivered? Do they want to know? Is it part of dignity? Is it irrelevant in a time of crisis?
So I think there, again, two bits to it as we're talking. So obviously, whether the money comes to me on a blockchain or somebody's actually walked in with a bag of cash, at the time of need, what I need, and wherever that money comes from, obviously I'll take it and I'll react and use it. For us as agencies, and I'm sure my colleagues here will talk more about it, the donor reporting part becomes very important, and therefore that transparency of donor reporting is very important, and for us to recognize that, okay, if you gave in $1, the example Carmen said, that you pay $100 and that $100 were delivered, that is where some of these technologies make a difference, but that's again something inward facing for us to talk to the donors and talk about. Certainly not, I'm assuming, to the person on the ground.
For us, what's increasingly important is this concept of providing choice. And you can only provide meaningful choice if you also provide information and education. So there are many contexts where basically the readiness is not there, the digital literacy is not there, the financial literacy is not there. So it could be premature to introduce some of these things visibly to the end beneficiaries. But it's also part of our roadmap to include these kind of onboarding and educational programs so that people do understand what they are potentially benefiting above and beyond other modalities. And that for us is key, because ultimately we all like to benefit from the different options, right? And I say in this particular context, because it's very situational specific as well, it is the best alternative. And that's what we're trying to bring forward as we deliver cash, but also other type of aids as well, so that at the end it's down to the individual and not our thinking what's best for that person, but it's really, the person on the receiving end that can tell us what is the best way for them to be helped in that particular context.
Yeah, and I think I want to elaborate on that last point, because we are very client-driven, right? We want to make sure that everything we do is requested and needed, and people have many different ways of telling them exactly what they want and how they would like to receive it. But we also struggle when we're dealing with new technologies is they don't know what stablecoin is, so how are they going to ask for that? So we have to kind of weigh being client-driven as well as being able to explain to clients what different solutions are that they may not know about. In addition, I think there's pros and cons. I mean, yes, we want clients to know where the aid come from, why they were receiving this aid, how they were selected. We need to be very transparent in all of these things because, as we've mentioned, we have to choose who gets cash and who does not get assistance. And that is a very difficult choice to make when you're in the field. So we want to make sure that clients understand these things. But in a crisis, we don't have a lot of time to say, okay, and you need to learn this application. You need to beef up your digital literacy so that we know you will not be a victim of fraud. We have only one contact with someone at some certain points, and there's a lot of information we need to get to them, and we won't be able to cover it all. So in that ways, we do need to have different methods of delivering digital assistance even. So the person who is more comfortable with a mobile wallet can use that. Someone else who is more comfortable with other types of technology, we can go a little bit further. And then there's some people who will not have a cell phone, as we've discussed, these very rural areas that are just uncovered with any kind of infrastructure. And we need to be able to meet them where they are and what they need, maybe just cash or in kind. So having all of these different mechanisms, modalities, and systems means we have to have a lot of resources on our side to meet our clients where they're at and how they want to receive aid. We need a lot of back-end support, and that's how things can get a bit expensive. But it's trying to be client-led and then measure that with cost-effectiveness.
I love that nuance to it because I think that we often boil down over 100 million people into one label, the displaced. Sometimes it gets bifurcated into internally displaced and refugees, but we are talking about 100 million people. And when people ask me questions about refugees or refugee issues, I always like to point out that there is the full spectrum of humanity in there. So, just as different as you are from your family, from your arch nemesis, from anyone you've ever encountered in your life, all of that, anyone could become a refugee. And when you serve people who are refugees, you can't just stereotype to say this region or this country needs to do this. There's so much nuance to the issue and so many different, diverse people within that. So I love that approach. We've been talking a lot about the blockchain side of things, but from your perspective, Emily, what lessons can we learn just from NGOs adopting digital tools? Because that's been happening for a long time, but now that we're trying to push this new effective technology into the space, what can we learn from the last generation of adoption?
Yeah, I think there's many different ways of digital cash delivery. In fact, we can say a cash is delivered digitally if the beginning to the end of the cash cycle, which includes a lot of different steps, was fully digital. Or we can simply say, look, we gave them physical cash, but we used a QR code and blockchain technology to manage the data, so it was digital. So I think there's a huge, it's just very, complicated. And I think that one of the challenges that we face is something I've mentioned before, which is having the internal capacity and resources to really roll out new technology and make sure that with all of the different changes that we go through as an NGO and our conflict and crises go through, we are still able to support that technology in the future. So I think, funding can be a constraint there. It's hard to roll out things at a national level for a certain crisis when we're not too sure when the next grant will come through. We only have 1 year grant to do something with. So there are sorts of kind of challenges there in terms of funding and resources, but also the internal regulation and kind of concerns about trying something new is a challenge, especially for smaller NGOs who don't have any of the type of funding that even IRC has to really invest in these technologies. So we need to be able to support our local partners who are NGOs just like IRC, but know the context so much better than we do. We want to support them too in getting on board with this technology.
I'm going to ask one more question to George, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience, so get ready. So yesterday we spoke a lot about leveraging real evidence for measuring impact. And I love, even within the innovation space, your approach to that. So can you just share a bit about how you do that?
Oh, it's been a journey since we started 7 years ago, but very much what we try to do is leverage the innovation practices for the private sector, in terms of human-centered design, lean and agile methodologies. And we do it in a very iterative way. So we try to start very small attracting startups and NGOs that have their own innovations and trying to see how can they be deployed to our, let's say, reality on the ground. And just to give you an indication of the numbers, we have received more than 8,500 applications to date, different calls for applications. We have selected 100 projects, so it's a very selective process. And at the end, we have 16 now that are more active. We have mobilized 180 million in grant funding, and we have reached more than 9 million people last year out of these innovations, and they are different types. Not all of them will make it, right? Because then they are very fitting, but they are very fitting to a very unique context in one of our countries. We always work with our field operations, but some of them can be really scaled like building blocks that started in such a case many years back. So did Share the Meal app, so did Sky, which is an AI tool for, let's say, emergency assessment of different infrastructures now currently being used for bridge assessment in Pakistan following the flooding there. So the importance is that we need to have experts inside that speak the language with the people on the outside. So we have AI, we have blockchain specialists, both in innovation as well in our technology division, so that we can have both technical discussions as well as more programmatic conversations as well. But ultimately, it's also being ready to fail and learn from that and come back stronger with a better proposition, but especially inviting for this collaboration with the private sector, with the multi-sectoral agencies and so on, pooling resources the way that they're most effective, be that cash, be that technical assistance as well. So in that sense, we hope to continue benefiting from such generous contributions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, questions from the audience? Anybody? Mm-hmm.
Hello, thank you. Emily, you said that it's very important that these technologies also get translated into small organizations that don't have the technical staff, that don't have enough staff usually. How is this currently being done? Like, do you know examples of how big organizations translate this into their partners organizations? Do they exist global platforms to access knowledge and like all the systems that you're already using to like serve people with cash in the most marginalized places sometimes?
Yeah, so all of that is happening. The UN is a great example of that. For IRC, what we want to do is say, why not cash? And also, why not partner? So when we look at a local context, we want to see what is the context that we can support in terms of civil society, and how can we support them? In many ways, that is offering them our own technology. For example, we may contract with a financial service provider that is steep fees, and we will offer that to them through an agreement so that they can leverage this different type of technology. Now, that's not even talking about the blockchain, that's just potentially a mobile money operator or something like that. So we do this. In terms of capacity building, again, that's when we need long funding and relationships with organizations to do that with them. So we can build a relationship over time with these organizations so that eventually our jobs as NGO is to not have a job and put the power in the local context with the government, with the people, with civil society. So that's the ultimate goal, and to get there takes many years in some cases or is very fast in others.
Hey, I have a question over here. My name is Ruben Galindo. I'm the CEO of AirTM. We give dollar accounts to people throughout the developing world so they can receive micropayments. We have done some programs to help people receive assistance yeah, I guess we've done a lot of that, but we've never established a practice of going out to, I guess, your world to try to offer our services to try to help. We can land like $5 in someone's random account in Nigeria, for instance, in like 6 minutes. And we would love to use this technology to help. How would you recommend that we approach it, that we reach out, that we put ourselves in the right place?
We run constant calls for application, and we also proactively source innovations and startups to work with us. So both would be possible. So it's just a matter of having a conversation. We are actually looking at some peer-to-peer opportunities at the moment in this context. So it would be interesting just to talk and see exactly what you could do in this space. But many other organizations have similar processes where they just issue, requests and they say, we're looking for solutions around these need statements. If you feel that you match, then you're happy to apply, not only to us, but so does UNICEF, so does UNHCR. There are many different organizations, both within and outside the UN system, that are very much looking for that collaboration. Because why reinvent the wheel on our side, right? We are neither equipped nor resourced to do that. It's much better to collaborate with those that are already innovating on the front end.
Yeah, I'll second that from experience in a previous life with my own company. There is no informal way to work with the UN. So going through those formal channels that have been set up, I think, is very beneficial.
Thank you.
Other questions? We're coming up on time. Do we have a question?
Between cash and then usable services. And one of the issues is, like, for example, if I'm a refugee in our country and I have to interact online to participate in an economy, I still don't have a bank account. So is there, are you guys looking at different ways of leveraging digital identity so that they can be recognized by institutions around the world?
I think, again, there are layers on that side. So a lot of, from a technology point of view within the UN ecosystem, different agencies, identity, biometric identification, etc., was a response to crisis. As Emily was mentioning earlier on, a crisis happens and you just have to do stuff. So a lot of that tech dev has developed with that sense, and it might not have necessarily sort of looked at, all other issues about privacy, etc., etc., etc. But as the system looks at it as a whole, so there is a thinking going on about, yes, how can we get more privacy-focused, decentralized digital ID for these people? And I think once that's standardized, as a tech, as you know, there's a W3C standard on this, etc., that will clearly become interoperable. Again, ground reality today obviously is, I'll give you an example of an identity for a different UN agency. It's called UNRWA, UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency. They were established to look after the Palestinian refugees way back. Today, at that point in time, I think there were like 60,000 Palestinian refugees or so. Today, UNRWA caters to about 5 million Palestinian refugees. And actually, an identity document issued by UNRWA is a valid identity document for the Palestinians to travel across, at least in their countries and regions they have permitted. And now we are working with them, with UNRWA, to actually get that all into a digital wallet and, digitize it and modernize it with modern systems. But that's an example which is on ground, a digital identity solution, which is practically issued from a UN agency, practically effectively working across the globe.
Now, this is a great need across the system, because very often we're talking about undocumented people, at least from a local perspective, where they are now displaced into. A good example are Venezuelan migrants crossing to Peru. If they cross into Colombia, they are given a migrant resident card. If they crossed into Peru, not so easy. So how do you reach them? They are basically excluded from the financial sector because they cannot pass KYC requirements. So very often we try to work with governments that they accept our registry. It's a platform that we call Scope, where we try to document who's who. We try to leverage different technologies, like in the context of building blocks, we have, iris scanning technology that we actually know who's who. So we're trying to explore all kinds of things, because we know this space will be key, particularly as we digitalize everything we do. Also, identities and credentials will have to follow suit. It is very much depending on the local regulatory framework as well.
We don't have time to answer the questions, so I'm putting it on you, the community, to go up to each of these individuals and ask them how you can participate and come alongside the important work that they're doing. It's a very smart, educated community aligned with the urgency of doing, but we never know about those opportunities until we start the conversation. So thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you, Stella.
Thank you.